Hello and welcome to my SKYRIM Modlist comparison, where we take a look at different mod lists to help find the right one for you. For this video we'll be focusing on Vanilla Plus / Visual Focus lists. The term Vanilla Plus is vague, so for this video I'm just talking about lists that don't completely overhaul the game, but instead subtly improve it with better graphics, performance, bug fixes, quality of life improvements, and maybe some new content that feels like it was always there. And just before diving in, there's obviously so many mod lists available that it would take forever to compare them all, so I'm just focusing on 4 for this video, but that doesn't mean I won't compare more in the future. Also, remember that for many of these lists, you can swap out the EMB for one of your choosing, so just keep that in mind when comparing their looks, which will be put side by side at the very end. Anyway, let's get to it. First up is AVO, which is one of the most vanilla lists when it comes to gameplay. Its goal is to provide a base to build your own list upon, so if you've ever modded Skyrim a bunch, you know that one of the most tedious parts is adding bug fixes and going through the huge amount of graphics mods to find the best. But AVO gets that all out of the way. A plethora of bug fixes get it all running smoothly, and many of the most modern graphical enhancements are added on top, including parallax textures. And the main aim is to improve Skyrim's original look, rather than add a different aesthetic, which I think the new character faces here sum up nicely, as NPCs aren't all supermodels like in some lists, but they also don't look weirdly unnatural like in vanilla. Just a good middle ground. Although there are a couple new additions to the landscape, like fancy new bridges, but it's all minor stuff that fits nicely. Other than that, there's no changes to perks, combat, loot, or anything of that nature. Although it is worth noting that Creation Club content has been added into the world more naturally, with better item distribution, and in a couple instances, new lines of dialogue. And finally, here's my performance with these specs here, running at 1440p. Although I am recording with OBS at the same time, so I have about 5 to 10 FPS less than usual. As you can see, I typically hold between 50 to 70 FPS, which seems in line with the recommended specs you see here. Legends of the Frost changes the graphics as much as it can while dropping as little performance as possible, and the result is one of the smoothest and most accessible mod lists to date. Compared to all the other lists, this one sticks to the vanilla look the most, with all the new textures looking like sharper versions of the originals. It's worth noting that there's no EMB, and this version I'm showing here has no reshade preset selected, but you can easily add your own, and there probably will be one included some point in the future. On top of all the bug fixes, a couple gameplay tweaks are included, with Blade and Blunt being the largest. It adds a little more depth to combat, so you're no longer blindly swinging with little consequence. So stamina regeneration stops when you attack, power attacks stagger enemies more, you'll move slower with your weapon out, and so on. It's worth giving the mod page a quick look, but honestly all the changes fit as if they were always there, especially since the list keeps all the vanilla damage multipliers. On top of this, there are a couple tweaks, like traps alerting enemies, and there's some quality of life stuff like faster mining, all things that you wouldn't even realise are mods if you've never played before. Finally, there's performance, and as you can imagine, my FPS stayed locked to pretty much whatever I set it to. It's just fluctuating around my locked 70 FPS here because OBS recording is being OBS. Plus, there's some extra tweaks you can make to the INI files if you want to squeeze out a little more frame rate. So I really love this list because it makes me feel strangely nostalgic, like I've been playing heavily modded Skyrim for so long that in my mind this is how it used to look. Obviously vanilla looks much worse than this, but what I'm trying to say is that it perfectly captures that vanilla feeling. ASCENSIO aims to make Skyrim into a high-end visual game, but it doesn't go so overboard that it destroys the performance. It's easily the most comparable to AVO, as it mainly focuses on graphics and bug fixes, so really it's down to whichever one you think looks better, and I'll compare them side by side at the very end. Performance is almost identical to AVO, sometimes even a tiny bit better, with most places giving me somewhere between 50 to 80 FPS at 1440p. Although, because this list is a bit denser with its foliage and such, I found it's a little more prone to stuttering when loading in new areas. Nothing off-putting or anything, but just something I noticed. ASCENSIO also has a few performance options you can switch on, which gave me a 10 to 20 FPS boost, with the list still looking great. Again, no gameplay changes have been made, other than the quality of life stuff like true directional movement, and while Anniversary Edition is required, the content has barely been touched outside of improved textures. Finally, there's a neat little patch you can enable to remove insects and all creepy crawlies from the game, if you have a fear of such things. Dragonborn adds as few mods as possible, while still overhauling a good amount of its visuals, and it includes a bunch of optional gameplay tweaks on top. For its looks, it strikes a good middle ground out of all the lists I've covered, as it's more detailed with more textures and models compared to Legends of the Frost, but it doesn't take things as far as the other lists, with textures mostly staying around 1080p. And with the footage you're seeing here, I have the optional reshade switched on, as it's a bit too desaturated with it off. As for performance, this is where the list really shines, as despite it being a clear upgrade from vanilla, it manages to run incredibly well, pretty much never dipping below 80 FPS, and it can even be played on the Steam Deck. So yeah, great performance. What also makes this list stand out is all the optional mods. By default, the list comes with 4 categories: optional gameplay, including the Simon Magus overhauls like Mysticism for more spells, Adamant for more perks, and so on, plus this Blade and Blunt which I talked about before. Next is the optional balance category, with mods like Timing is Everything and Creation Club Rebalance, which adjusts how quests start and fit into the world. Then there's optional content, including some huge quest mods like Broomer and Worm's Tooth, and some new weapons and armours. And finally, there's the optional distribution category, which adds the new items from Creation Club and the new quest mods into Skyrim's world space. So there's a lot of stuff, but this is still technically Vanilla Plus, as it can all be switched off. So you have the choice of a vanilla playthrough, or the option to add more content that changes a bunch, but still doesn't feel crazily different from normal. So, to summarise, AVO offers high-end graphics, and is built specifically to build your own list upon, and because of this, I've been using it to install mods for my top 5 mod videos. Legends of the Frost has the most vanilla look out of them all, but it's because of this that any system that can run default Skyrim can probably run this list. Plus the gameplay tweaks are subtle, but do improve the game's weaker aspects. ASCENSIO focuses purely on top-end graphics, making it one of the best looking lists I've played, while still holding on to a surprising amount of performance. And finally, Dragonborn pushes the looks as far as possible while still being playable for low-end systems. Plus the ton of optional mods allow you to tweak exactly how overhauled you want the gameplay to be. So hopefully this will help you choose a list, or it's made your decision even harder because they're all great. And of course there's plenty other Vanilla Plus and graphics focused mod lists like Almo Rim and Aurora and so many more, which I'll get to in the future. But yeah, now we'll finish off with some side-by-side comparisons. thank you for watching, and thank you to my Patreon supporters, Jaden Shaw, Janice, Jake Carlo, Dweezil P. Pants, Rook, Alec Bentley, Jack Ma, and Christian Howell. It's because of these contributions I'm able to spend so much time on these videos, and yeah, just every little helps, so thank you so much. And thank you for watching, and farewell.